Today, I'm talking with David Barkin, Distinguished Professor of Economics at the Universidad Autónoma Metropolitana, Mexico. He collaborates with indigenous and peasant communities, many of which are developing new institutions trying to build a post-capitalist society. And he's recognized for his theory of radical ecological economics. Hello, David.
Oh, what a pleasure to be with you on this international connection.
Was that introduction okay?
That's fine.
And what is radical ecological economics?
Radical ecological economics is the result of our work with communities. It's radical in the sense that ecological economics as a field was invented in 1989 at a meeting in Washington, D.C., but it was invented by economists, mostly economists and some biologists who were interested in using their tools of economic analysis to understand what were the impacts of environmental change on the planet. The heritage of that was a number of extraordinarily important thinkers. One of them was Kenneth Boulding. Kenneth Boulding was a professor of economics in his last years at the University of Colorado, and he wrote a very, very prescient article called "The Coming Spaceship Earth," in which he said, if we think about Earth as a spaceship and all of the world's population were passengers in the spaceship, and everything that the humanity had to survive was in the hold of the spaceship, then the question would be, how long would they last in space before everyone died off? And that was an extraordinarily important, influential article coming out at about the same time as the beautiful essay called Silent Spring by Rachel Carson. That was we could say the roaring 60s. And then a Romanian by the name of Nicolas Georgescu Rochen did another masterpiece. Rochen was awarded the prize of the most promising young economist, in the United States at the time. He was at Harvard, and he wrote a book called The Law of, what was it? The Law of Thermodynamics and Entropy. And in his book, he was saying, there's no way we can get around the inevitable problem of the fact that there's only so much energy in the world, and that to the extent that we're using it, we're degrading it so that it will no longer be available for the human species. Some 20 years later, 25 years later, the end of the century, the society was created using the tools, and some of your listeners may know that a man by the name of Nordhaus won the Nobel Prize in economics for his extraordinary, at the time, emphasis on the fact that global warming was a problem, but not an unmanageable problem, using the tools of economics. Where I come from, I was born in the United States, but by that time I had lived 40 years in Mexico, and working with indigenous communities, became quite convinced that the state, that is the government public policy, would be unable to solve the environmental problems, and that there was an extraordinary fount of knowledge, of tradition, and of responsibility among the peoples of, well, in that time, Mesoamerica, to confront the problems. And in fact, not only there was this knowledge, but they were actually going about living a different way of life, saying, we're not interested in capital accumulation. We're not interested in the consumer economy. What we're interested in is living our lives the way we've always done. But very, very importantly, I think two elements of what it meant for them to be living their lives. One was that no one was left behind. That was extraordinarily important. What does that mean? That means that there are no children stuck in daycare centers doing nothing, playing, but the children are actively involved in participating in solving the community's problems. But the other part of that was that there are no old people who are sitting around in old people's homes or in wheelchairs doing becoming parasites on the community or creating problems, because the people, regardless of whatever their disabilities are or their problems are of old age, had a fount of knowledge which the community valued and depended upon for their leadership and their wisdom. And so this approach was very, very important and very firmly impressed upon me, together with another thing which I would imagine that many of your listeners don't really understand, and that is that society is part of nature. And that's a really extraordinary thing, and that if we're going to live as a society, we have to take care of all the other non-human species that are in the environment. Those non-human species include the millions or trillions of microbacteria that are within each of our bodies, but are also the species that are in the environment. And the question is, to what extent can we make use of, can we take advantage of all of these resources, that, as they're called in the economy, without damaging our own future lives? And so that's what led me to, at first we called it ecological economics from below. And then someone said, well, we had to make it more understandable, so we called it Radical Ecological Economics.
I changed a traditional economist's view on that once. He said that the biosphere was a subset of the global economy. I said, don't be silly, it's the other way around. I said, what would happen to the biosphere if the global economy was destroyed? He said, nothing. It would probably get better. I said, what would happen to the global economy if the biosphere was destroyed? He said, oh, okay, yes, okay, I see what you mean.
Well, that's an extraordinarily a simpler way of phrasing it than the way the long description I just gave.
You contacted me about Marx's views changing in later life, and I'm writing a series of articles trying to persuade anti-capitalists that commons is a better route to post-capitalism than Marxism. But you opened my eyes to Marx's later ideas, which sounded much more like commons to me. rather than getting the working class to rise up and overthrow the state. So thank you very much for that.
Well, it was my pleasure to get in contact with you about that. But the extraordinary thing about it was that all of this insight by Marx were marginal notes in his notebooks
Yeah.
of the readings that he was making of anthropologists in the late 19th century. Of course, he was slightly immobile in his home, in his lodgings in London at the time, but it was extraordinary, even given the limited amount of anthropological work that was going on at that time, that he acquired all of this knowledge and began to make two, I think, very, very important discovery or declarations. One was in communication, in correspondence with people in in Russia at the time. He was asked very, very presciently, does the Russian peasantry have to destroy itself or have to be destroyed in order to move to a better society? And his letters at the beginning of the 80s, at that point, were extraordinarily insightful about saying, well, perhaps the Russian peasants in their mirror could actually skip the stage of capitalism and go on to create a communal society in which they would be able to improve their standard of living, take care of the environment of their surroundings, and point the way to a better future world. That was a very first insight that was extraordinarily important. The other was his familiarity with what was going on in Ireland at the time. And similarly, he was very, very impressed by the Irish capacity for communal organization of their land holdings and their disdain for the Irish state. And then he got a hold of all these anthropologists from what we now know as the Global South. But let me say that one of these parts of the Global South is what is now known as North America. Because he was very, very impressed by an indigenous group that we call, in Anglo-Saxon terms, Iroquois right now. But it was part of the Housatonic, I'm pronouncing it badly, confederation in the northeastern part of North America. And they had lived for centuries, if not millennia, taking care of their land and assuring a good quality of life with full participation. And another important thing, which is now very, very significant, and that is a full participation of women and men in the process of management. And then he came across, of course, the literature about Mesoamerica and the Andes, and he began to write about that. And he said he had great hopes that these people, with their communal traditions and their understanding of the need to take care of the land, of the environment, would be able to create the basis for a new society after capitalism.
Yeah, I read about the Iroquois Federation. It was David Graeber.
Right.
I was amazed. It was really sort of a participatory democracy in action.
Well, it's very, very interesting. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, even before David Graeber, uh, read about it in a travelogue of a French missionary who went to the northern part of the Iroquois Confederation and described all of that. And actually, the French missionary brought back to France one of the leaders of the Confederation in
I
the
read about that.
18th
I read about that. Oh
in the
my God, I would
18th
have loved to have
century.
been in that room.
And it's really quite extraordinary. The indigenous person, after being in Paris for a little while, said, "I don't want to stay here. This is an awful society. How can you have children in begging in the streets and the dirt and the filth uh, and the bad treatment of so many people? This is something we would not allow." Well, that's in chapter 2 of the Graeber book, which is called The Dawn of Everything.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I couldn't believe that when I read it. I would have loved to have been in that meeting. So I want to show that revolutionary change doesn't have to be centralized, and that the Russian Revolution could have produced a decentralized result, and the 20th century could have been very different. And I'd like to know what you think about that. Um, I mean, attempts at decentralized, non-hierarchical, truly democratic organization keep coming back throughout history, don't they? And then they don't seem as though they're going to stop.
Well, I don't think it's a question of they keep coming back. They've never left.
Yeah.
Uh, I think that the important thing is that there are literally thousands of communities around the world in all the continents, including the global north, of peoples who are organizing themselves, who have organized themselves to respect their territories and to make sure that their young and their old are not burdens on society. And they are doing so with a quality of life and a celebration of their relationship to the cosmos that is quite extraordinary. We call this, we call this native tourism when people from the north go and visit an Amazonian community, or you have a very, very beautiful, colorful indigenous celebration of life or the crops around the world. And one of the questions that led me to codify radical ecological economics was the fact that mainstream social sciences talk about many of these communities as subsistence communities. I would ask your listeners, your viewers, to think about it. What kind of subsistence community exists where you have a 3 or 4 day communal ceremony, celebrating life, and with everyone participating, and a community in which the people are no extraordinary inequalities within the community, and they have mechanisms for that, and they are continually attempting, and this is extraordinarily important, continually attempting to make sure that people are able to have an improving quality of life, But I want to emphasize one thing about the many of these communities that we've had contact with. These are not communities that are separated from what we call the modern world. These are communities that are sending their young children to universities around the world. These are communities that are learning about the improvement, the advances in science and technology. They're communities that are learning about the advances in medicine, and they are communities that are evaluating what part of this knowledge is valuable for their well-being, and what part of this knowledge has to be discarded. And that's extraordinary. If you think about it, if you accompany the people that we've had an opportunity to accompany, just here in Mexico, but it's all over the world.
So growing the commons, we're promoting commons projects, but mainly in the global north. I'd like to talk to you about what's happening in the global south and how we might connect. And in Mexico specifically, I want to talk about the projects there, especially the Zapatistas and the Ejido movement and others. From what I read, Ejido is like a land commons, but the land is ultimately owned by the state. Is that right? I mean that's a problem if the state changes its mind. I think in 1991 the government allowed Ejido land to be rented or sold and stopped creating new Ejido land projects because Mexico wanted to be in NAFTA. Is that right?
Well, it was 1992.
1992.
It was the constitutional a constitutional amendment by a neoliberal regime. But the interesting thing about that constitutional regime is more than half of the Ejido land that could have been privatized has not been privatized. It's held in commons. And while it is literally true that all the land is given in concessions to the ejidos, and therefore ultimately property rests in the state, the fact is that the ejidos are in one way or another self-governing groups of people. Many of those ejidos, because of the expansion of neoliberalism, to the private management of those lands, but a substantial number in Mexico, and I might mention a growing number of these communities are beginning to insist upon the collective management of their ejido lands. This has become increasingly important because it doesn't matter if you have land if you don't have access to water.
Mm-hmm.
And the collective organization for the control of water rights is an area of great contention in this moment, and what's going on from the base of communities. So there are a great many communities that are beginning to look for ways of reclaiming their control over the water rights that the Mexican Constitution gives them, but have been privatized by diverse nefarious mechanisms. I won't go into the details of that.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they're very violent, and sometimes they're very corrupt.
And the privatization of ejido lands, that's what caused the Zapatista uprising, is that right?
No, the Zapatista uprising was a much more profound uprising than simply the privatization. The Zapatistas uprising was on January 1st, well, it became public January 1st, 19 1994, which was the date in which the NAFTA, or the free trade area, went into effect. And they said the underlying cause of the choice of that date was that NAFTA is a threat to our sovereignty, to our freedoms, and to our ability to live a good quality of life. And the NAFTA, the Zapatista uprising, unfortunately, was a very, very extraordinarily prescient understanding of what would happen under free trade, because what free trade did was subject much of the Mexican economy to control by U.S. capital and U.S. Political interests. And the Zapatista rebellion, which I think it's very, very important for the viewers to understand, is still alive and well.
Yeah.
32 years later. And
how are they doing? How are they doing? And what have they achieved? And how are they doing?
Let me give you. Let me begin by saying the order of magnitude. What is the Zapatista rebellion? Who are the Zapatistas? Because many times we think of the Zapatistas as a group of men, and I want to emphasize that, a group of men on horseback riding with their guns and being very militaristic. The Zapatista movement is a group of people in the southern state of Chiapas that is on the border, that encompasses a population of about 500,000 people. And I think that that's extraordinarily important to understand. We're not talking about a small band of horseback riders, like sometimes Zapata himself is characterized during the revolutionary period at the beginning of the 20th century. But also, I want to emphasize that the area that they are controlling and the area they have rescued from cattle ranchers, from monocrop production, and from timber exploitation, is an area, a gigantic area, the size greater than the size of the country that we know of as Netherlands or Holland. So we're not talking about a small movement that is socially and politically irrelevant. We're talking about a movement that over the past 30 years has dramatically improved the life of 500,000 people, and more, perhaps just as important, has brought women in as equal partners into the process of local development and local management, local political management, local social management, and has improved the health standards and the nutritional ability of the people. So the Zapatista movement is a movement in which you have, in essence, through a decentralized local system of what you're doing is you have a movement that has extraordinarily enriched the lives of 500,000 people and led to a decentralized series of local governments throughout this territory that are self-managed and are insisting upon the strengthening of the commons.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, one of my main points is that the mainstream Marxist approach of workers seizing centralized power is not going to work in the global north, and the commons approach is much better. I'd like your opinion on that. And is it different in the global south?
Well, I think I'm not sure it's going to work in the global north either. In the global south, I think that the domination of neoliberal economic plans and the political domination of what's called globalization has led to a limiting of the possibilities for nation states to make the kinds of changes we're talking about. And the few nation states that have tried to do that, and I can use in this case, unfortunately, talking now at the beginning of May of 2026, the 60-year experience of Cuba is terrible because of the way it's under attack as a nation state trying to create trying to insist upon the commons and trying to insist upon improving the quality of life for all of its people. But the kind of commons that are being created by the thousands, tens of thousands of communities that are involved in resuscitating or strengthening their cultural, political, and economic heritage is definitely giving a new kind of breath of life to what you and your colleagues in the North are trying to do for reviving the commons. But I think that it's very, very important to understand that these movements for building the commons, these movements for rebuilding the commons in the South are not state-run. These are grassroots, well, you could call them grassroots elements, but these are communities that have a millenary tradition. Many of them can trace their roots back thousands of years. And at the beginning of our conversation today, you mentioned David Graeber and the chapter he wrote on with David Wengrow on the Iroquois. But the important thing about this is that there are still many thousands, I want to emphasize this, there are still thousands of communities around the world that are practicing these traditions and recuperating these knowledges and enriching them with the best of modern science and technology to improve their quality of life and protect their territories.
So community is very weak in the global north. Well, I can't speak for the global north. I can speak for the UK. There are very few people walking in the street and talking with each other. All the front gardens are paved over. The little pubs and shops have closed. But community is much stronger in the global south, isn't it? I think. And that's a big factor in what's possible as regards the commons, isn't it?
Well, I hate to make these kinds of sweeping generalizations that you just made, because large parts of the global south, as you call it, are very, very much intertwined with the dynamics, the personalities, the politics, and the economics of individualization, which goes with the capitalist economy. And so what I'm talking about, when I'm talking about thousands of communities and I'm talking about millions of people, I'm not talking about the global south writ large. In this particular moment, for example, in Latin America, there's a struggle among those who are trying to impose the rule of capital and those who are trying to strengthen the commons that they live in. And so that kind of struggle is a very, very real struggle which we live day to day. And that struggle, of course, is being fed by large injections of money and politics from the global north.
Yeah. But are you saying that there is no more real community in the global south than there is in the global north?
No, I'm not saying that.
Mhm.
I'm saying that there are lots of communities. There are real communities, very, very important communities all over the global south and in parts of the global north that are strengthening and expanding community. I could talk about, well, I did. We just talked about the Zapatistas, but I'll give you another example in Mexico. There's a cooperative union of people from 3 different ethnic groups that were formed 50 years ago called Tosepan, and brings together 250,000 people.
Can you say that one again and spell it?
Tosepan, Tosepan.
Uh-huh.
They have a second name, Titanaski, but I won't go into that. We'll leave it at Tosepan. And they formed 50 years ago. And during that 50 years, they have been effective in creating a credit union which finances all of their economic opportunity ventures, in which they have 40,000 families participating. And they have developed a land use plan for their area, which is extraordinary because it's a very valuable and very rich area.
And which area is this?
It's called the mountainous area in the north of the state of Puebla. And their land use plan, which has now been validated by the government, very, very important, prohibits mining, prohibits high voltage electric lines, prohibits the installation of supermarkets, prohibits the use of foreign investment for commercial operations in their territory.
Wow.
And the extraordinary thing about it is, with all of these prohibitions, the people in that community will tell you that they're living a good quality of life.
And are these kind of projects replicable?
Well, not on that scale. A scale of 250,000 people formally organized into cooperatives like that just doesn't seem like it's going to happen again in Mexico. But and it's extraordinary. It's extraordinary. They're 50 years old and they've just written a book, which is a life plan for the next 40 years. But it's replicable. It's being what's the word?
Replicated.
It's being what?
Replicated.
It's being replicated. It's being replicated in different ways and on different scales throughout Mexico and around the world.
Around the world.
Yeah, and perhaps we should move in this at this moment to a reference to a consortium of communities that was created beginning 30 years ago, but formalized in 2008 and 2010, called Territories of Life. And that community, that consortium brings together thousands of communities in every continent, including parts of the global north, and I can talk about that. I would like to mention that in the next few minutes,
Please do.
that are committed to the collective organization of their territories, the collective governance, very, very important, the setting up of rules for the way in which their people will interact with each other, and then determine, because they have created this international consortium, looking for international validation of their right to informed consent if the national governments in the countries in which they are located want to do any activities in their territories. And that goes back to an ILO convention of 1989. I really want to stress that the notion of the commons is, and the development of these collective ways of managing is not something brand new that was invented 10 years ago.
No.
But the ILO, the International Labor Organization, codified a convention, it's Convention 169, for the free and informed previous consent for any national government to engage in activities in indigenous territories.
And this you said this consortium is called Territories of Life,
That's right.
and it's indigenous consortium.
Well, most of the members are indigenous, but many are communities, because many are what in Mexico we would call mestizo communities. That is, they're mixed blood communities, because many indigenous people have interbred now with people of other descents.
Mhm.
The important thing about that is that the territories of life encompasses many people in the global north.
Well, really?
Yeah, I can give you an example of one very important group in Finland, which I just visited. The group is called Snow Change, and which is working.
Snow, as in snow change.
Snow Change.
Yeah.
But they put it in a single word.
Uh-huh.
And it's a cooperative. And over the past quarter of a century since they were formed, they have engaged in a property of protecting old growth forests and trying to rescue peatlands, which are one of the major forms of carbon sequestration that nature has developed in the world. And they are rehabilitating the waterways, the lakes, and the fjords in their region, so that they can have healthy fishing, while assuring that the populations are not endangered. The important thing about Snow Change is not only are they protecting old growth forests, but they are doing something which is extraordinary, which is called rewilding.
Mm-hmm.
That is, they're taking old areas which were formerly forests and trying to rebuild. No, I'm sorry, not trying. They are rebuilding the forest structures of yore. The important thing of this is not just the trees, but when you rebuild a forest, you rebuild all of the life of the wildlife, and the way we is that is the non-human species that are so important to our enjoying the quality of life. And they also have as part of their activities, activities to support the Sami population in the Arctic area. And the other interesting thing about that is that they've created an alliance between all the people above the Arctic Circle who are living in the Arctic Circle. That is in Siberia, Finland, all the other Nordic countries, Greenland, Iceland, Canada, and Alaska. And these groups of people that are part of this this concept of territories of life are going about a very systematic program of re-enriching re-enriching their territories, making them capable of a good quality of life, and also enabling their territories to make a substantial contribution to counteract environmental degradation on a global scale.
That's really, really exciting. I have to look up this territories of life.
You can find, let me just make an advertisement. If you look at Territories of Life, there's a book, a 350-page book, which is beautifully illustrated, 50 pages of footnotes, and on the internet, which is freely downloadable in English and Spanish.
Fantastic. Why didn't I know about that?
Well, I mean, that's part of the problem. Most of the people who are talking about commons think about the commons in the terms of your organization and the kind of organization in Canada, which has been very, very important. And I want to stress that. But they're in Canada, for example, they're fighting they're fighting struggles against local governments in British Columbia, in what's the far east, Newfoundland, and in the other Canadian provinces, because the economic interests of the country see that if you give these rights to, if you accord these rights to the indigenous population, what you're doing is reducing the ability of large corporations to continue their process of capital accumulation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what do you think are the main barriers to building commons in both the global south and the global north, and how might we overcome them? Is it always going to be marginal, or can it actually challenge capitalism?
Well, I'm very optimistic in the sense that I think capitalism is on its death.
I'm more optimistic after this conversation.
I think that capitalism is on its deathbed. But perhaps that's not what your audience wants to hear.
I don't know. It seems to be having a good attempt to commit suicide, doesn't it, capitalism?
And but I think that the important thing about that is, in some ways, what I'm talking about are marginal in the sense that they're not in Hollywood movies. Although I must admit that there have been a number of very, very good movies recently celebrating people who are trying to do this in the global north. I can think, for example, of Wes Jackson is Wes. There's a wonderful movie called Prairie Prophecy. I recommend it to your people. Have you heard of it?
No.
celebrating the work of rebuilding the prairies in the United States, in the Midwest of the United States, by this agroecologist called Wes Jackson, who has spent all of his life showing that the wildlife, the bison, the collective control of land and the use of it with agroecological techniques are extraordinarily valuable to improving the quality of life of people who are capitalist farmers. And Prairie Prophecy is a movie that I would recommend to your people. But what I want to recommend also is the understanding that in Norway, I believe more than 3/4 of the land is held in commons.
Really?
Your face speaks 1,000 words.
Do you have any links for that?
Yeah, I can send them to you.
Okay.
There, I've just been working. Yeah, it's an article in Ambio magazine, the journal called Ambio. The
AMBIO.
diverse, yeah, Ambio, from 2025, which is called The Extent and Diversity of Recognized Indigenous and Community Lands, Cases from Northern and Western Europe.
Okay, I'll look at that. But back to Mexico for a second. Do you have any links or sources of information for people to keep up to speed with the Zapatista and the Ejido and the other movements in Mexico? And also, what might they be able to do if they would like to help in any way?
Okay. The links are very, very easy. If you just put Zapatista movement in your search machines, you'll find lots and lots of material on that. And they have their own site, which is very, very good because it's available in like 15 languages, which are all the declarations over the past 30 years of what they're doing and what they're trying to do, but also a description of the kind of onslaught by organized crime against them, because this is an area where they control now the transit, and organized crime will, of course, like to use this territory for its own purposes. But it's very easy to do that. Tosepan is less well documented, but there's another community called Cheran. Let me spell it out, Cheran, which had an uprising in 2011 by 30. I want to stress this. The uprising was instigated by 30 women who stood in the middle of the road against a criminal logging group, and with their babies in their arms, they were able to stop the logging effort and catalyzed the community into supporting and developing a collective effort to expel organized crime from their area. But not only that, what happened also was that as a result of that, the community realized the extraordinary significance of their indigenous heritage. And in the 15 years since then, they have installed self-governance, they've expelled political parties, they've expelled the national police force, they have obligatory bilingual education, and they have 4 communal enterprises which provides some of the economic economic resources that they need for their own survival and well-being.
Wow. So it's
The Quran, you can find lots of information in English. Again, looking it up in the community.
So it's much more than, it's
what?
much more than the Zapatista and Ejido in Mexico. There's much more going on.
Oh, yes. Yes. The article that I wrote that was the instigation for our conversations, in some sense, called Radical Ecological Economics, with open access on the internet. You just put Radical Ecological Economics in. It's this subtitle of the article is a paradigm from the South, the global South. Have I lost you?
No, you're back. It was a few seconds. But I'll definitely put a link to that in the description, as well as all the other things we've been talking about.
But the thing I want to stress about that is that there are literally in Mexico, just in Mexico, hundreds of communities that are involved in this kind of operation. Some of them with the support of government, and some of them in direct confrontation with the government. But and throughout Latin America, you have examples of communities. I would venture to say that the only reason the Amazon still exists is because of the hundreds of communities that are still resisting the illegal gold mining, the petroleum exploitation, and the forest degradation, as well as expansion of sorghum and soy production. What can the audience do to find out more about this? There's a lot of references in my article, and in Territories of Life has its own web page. So there's a problem of in the global north, there are literally hundreds of communities, and the importance of this is really much more than I think many of you appreciate, including this gives you an idea of this, the article in Ambio, that, by the way, is co-authored by the man who is in charge of snow change. But the Maoris in New Zealand have a great deal of control. The commons in New Zealand are very, very important, and it's a very, very important struggle in Australia too. I don't know how much contact your movement has with what's going on among indigenous peoples and indigenous rights in Australia and New Zealand.
We don't. So I'd like to build these kinds of relationships.
There's a very good book that I will show you. It's called The Commons in an Era of Neoliberalism, of Uncertainty, I'm sorry. Decolonizing Nature, Economy, and Society, published by the University of Toronto Press by a man from Ghana. And it's a beautiful collection of essays that he wrote.
Again.
The next time we talk, I'll make sure our connection is better.
Okay. And if you'll allow me, I'd love to sort of tap into your wisdom and get some more information that we can broadcast on Growing the Commons.
Great. Bye-bye.
Thank you, David. Bye-bye. Lovely speaking with you. Bye-bye.
If you like our channel, Please consider liking this video and subscribing. The more people like our videos and subscribe to our channel, the more the YouTube algorithm will share them. It doesn't cost anything, so please press the like and subscribe buttons. And if you click the bell icon just underneath as well, you'll get a notification when we upload a new video. Thank you.